everyone. Good to be here. My name is Eleftherios. I am the co-founder of the Radical project. And today I will talk to you about a new project or a different project coming out of our DAO that's called DRIPS. Specifically, the title of my talk is called Dependency Funding with DRIPS. This is an image from the Nix package manager. I believe that for the software engineers in the room, this interconnected web is something not surprising. But this type of thing always fascinated me. I actually kept obsessing about software dependency trees. And the reason is that I believe that they reveal this profound truth about our species, that we all interdependent, and our success lies effectively upon the success of others. So when we within our DAO, we started thinking about what is our public goods play, how can we contribute to this ecosystem, I kept coming back to this question: is there any way where we can engineer new funding structures that effectively harness this interdependency? Before I actually show you some of the work that we've been doing with DRIPS, I wanted to talk a little bit about the existing ways to fund public goods and open source software. I have to start with donation platforms. Individual donations and corporate donations have been one of the most common ways where developers will access funding. And they all have contributed significantly to the space with capital and more things beyond capital. Obviously, there you have things like GitHub sponsors, leveraging the massive distribution effects of GitHub to basically simplify the funding process and bring funding to a lot of developers. Of course, you have Patreon that I believe that most of you are familiar with, building on the membership model and trying to align incentives between funders and recipients through benefits, effectively. And then finally, you have Open Collective. Pia was speaking just before me. I actually think that Open Collective is the platform that had the biggest cultural impact on the space, simply by contributing the ability to start an entity or join an entity and receive funding. And of course, as we're talking about Web 2, I believe that in this room, a lot of people know also the downside of this. Usually, this comes in the form of location restriction, a lot of bureaucratic hurdles, and with some of those platforms, also high fees. But when we've been looking at those different platforms, there's always one thing that always struck me, which is how much, when you operate on those platforms, with the exception of Open Collective, actually Open Collective has experimented with something more interdependent, but at least the other two, always treat you as an individual, like your project is actually in isolation from everything else that is, happening in the world. A funder funds a project, and that's just that, right? So, so this always struck me as, like, could we do something actually different? Moving towards the crypto Web3 space, with crypto networks came a renewed interest with funding public goods. Obviously, we are in a conference called Funding the Commons, which is a testament of this. And thinking about the experiments with regards to funding public goods, Gitcoin, of course, stands as one of the most inspiring examples. With the quadratic funding mechanism, they managed to bring a lot of new capital and a new way to actually allocate capital and align incentives between funders and recipients. And I think, they really inspired a lot of action on the public goods space. The only criticism I have with Gitcoin is the fact that Gitcoin has been, for a lot of developers, a one-off type of mechanism or a campaign-based mechanism. And what's wrong with that? Simply, when we talk to developers, they all care about predictability. Your bills are predictable. You need to have a predictable income while you're contributing to public goods. So that's, an area where I think that we can do better than that. Another example that has been getting a lot of attention on the space is retroactive public good funding, or retro PGF. This is an idea popularized by Vitalik Buterin and implemented by the Optimism Collective. And the main idea behind this is, of course, that it's a lot simpler to try to agree on what has been valuable to you, which public goods have been valuable to you, rather than actually try to speculate on what will be valuable. And and the Optimus Collective has been implementing this. To me, the most fascinating idea behind everything that's going on in the retro PGF world is this idea of linking the profits of an entity, in this case is the Optimus Collective, with a number of public goods that this collective depends on, and effectively making those public goods profitable. Another interesting project, that has been a massive inspiration to us is a project within the Ethereum ecosystem called Protocol Guild. The idea behind Protocol Guild is actually very simple. A few Ethereum contributors, they decided to effectively create a list, just a list, right? Of these are the different Ethereum core contributors that are making all of these other things, happening in the Ethereum ecosystem possible, as all of us depend on them. And then what they did is they created this list, they managed this list, and they went around and started asking for money. And it seems that this thing works. Actually, they have already managed to accumulate, if I'm not mistaken, 7 or 8 million. And this is money actually that act as incentives for some of the best developers we have on the space to actually keep contributing to this foundational infrastructure rather than actually, join another project hoping that, the token will do great. So especially retroactive public good funding and Protocol Guild has been our major inspirations, and they're very close to the work that we're doing with DRIPS. So what is DRIPS really? It's a decentralized toolkit for funding public goods that takes a similar retroactive approach, but instead of actually, treating every project and every individual as its own, it tries to tackle into this interconnected nature of software and public goods. Effectively, it provides a generalized funding platform for similar type of experiments like RetroPGF or Protocol Guild. It provides a simple, streamlined funding experience specifically tailored to software projects. And it also provides the possibility to use a continuous or recurring model, if you wish, to the one of four campaign-based models that you usually find in crypto. So how does this thing work? At the core of the experience, there's this list again. You see this primitive actually, popping again and again. And what is a list within the DRIPS context? That's a collection of Ethereum addresses, ENS names, and Git repositories, and I will explain how this thing works, that effectively they package together under one title. This is just a list that I have created about my own dependencies. You can see some of those things in action. And then you have these different items there, and then you have a percentage allocation to each of those items. And this list, can be your software dependencies, right? And we're making it super simple for your DAO to actually, figure out what are your dependencies and, put them on a list and fund them. But also it could be something completely different. It could be, the 100 top 100, privacy researchers on Ethereum, or it could be, something completely different with regards to, some of the public goods that actually inspire you, right? So that's the main idea, and what happens next? Of course, you create this list, you curate it. Behind the scenes, for the technical people in the room, that's simply a splits configuration, right? So that's all it is. And then within the DRIPS platform, you have the ability to fund it either as a one-off or with continuous funding. And then finally, now you have this object, right? And I think the mental model that I use is thing about Spotify and playlists, right? It's just that. You can now place it all over the web and bring awareness to this cause, as very similar to what the Protocol Guild discovered, that all it took was awareness. It seems that in this space, there are a lot of people that actually want to fund public goods, but they don't know who actually is in need of funding. It's an information problem to tap in the previous talk. The other thing that we're doing, and this is what I think is interesting, is that we try to take this network view and apply it, down the stack. So, for instance, let's say your project is about to receive some funds, you're about to claim them, then immediately we ask you to do the same, like specify who are the maintainers that actually should receive funding and what percentage should go to them, but also we invite you to create another list, which is the list of your dependencies, and pass that love, to those projects, and hopefully, through that process, create network effects and have this, drips basically flowing through the network. In addition, we've been engineering a number of additional tools to simplify the funding process. I mentioned before, Ethereum addresses, ENS names, and any Git repo, effectively, of any public software project. How does that work? We have developed a flexible identity solution that is optional, that uses oracles and Chainlink, and effectively, you as a funder, you can stream funds, send funds to any software project that you like, and then all they have to do is to claim it is go add the funding.json file in their repo. And what we like about this is that, Git forges and the main branch usually has already a method for coordination, right? In order for something to land there, that means that usually has, gone through some form of review. And we think that is really simplifying the funding process for both funders and recipients. Finally, I mentioned continuous payments before. So within DRIPS, you have the option to do a one-time payment or a continuous payment. Why do we like continuous payments so much? Two reasons. Many people that contributing to different DAOs, they operate under what we call, I guess, trust minimization assumptions, or like anonymity. And when you're working for an anonymous project, you prefer to have your the tokens you worked immediately, rather than actually have to wait until the end of the month, and you don't know what happens in crypto. On the other side, on the funder side, the other thing that we noticed is that, for instance, take something like retroactive public good funding. They did a massive round recently, and of course, they funded a lot of developers that need those funds to actually pay the bills. So what do these developers will do? They will actually sell those tokens, and this is something that I'm sure is bothering the Optimism Collective. So again, having this continuous payouts both provide predictability on the receiving end, and then flexibility on the funder. All of these things, all of this toolkit is actually packaged within one application. You can do those things end to end. You actually don't need to really worry too much about interacting with smart contracts. Although you can also do this, there's an SDK that you can use if you want to leverage some of those primitives and bring them to your own application. So today I'm happy to announce that the next iteration of the DRIPS toolkit and app is now live. You can access this under drips.network. Now our contracts are actually audited. They really well documented. So it's the first time really that we're starting to invite more people to actually use this infrastructure. In addition, we have submitted a proposal to the RadWorks DAO, which is where we're coming from, to allocate $1 million to fund its critical dependencies using DRIPS. And we're very excited about that because we want to showcase this. We want to showcase to the crypto world and encourage more people to fund their dependencies. Ideally, create a cultural norm around that. If you're doing well, make sure that you're actually passing that on to the people that make your work possible. So before I close, I also wanted to take a step back and talk a little bit about what's now possible, how you could use these primitives. And the first idea actually comes from this example that I mentioned before about the Optimism Collective. I really think that they after something that comes a bit from the future. I hope that this will become the norm in the future. But what I really think that is going on here, and what's exciting, is that we can now create the structures where an entity on chain is programmatically linking its profits to its dependents, and effectively aligning incentives with the people that make their work possible, and making sure that they are successful when something like the Optimism Collective is successful. So that's one thing now that you can actually use the DRIPS infrastructure to make it possible for your DAO. Of course, the same logic can be applied to a native token, right? And especially for the people in the room that participate in DAOs, that have governance tokens, you can do the exact same thing to actually distribute your native token to a bunch of your dependencies, finding a way actually to give them voice in your own ecosystem, and also upside if your ecosystem actually does really well, onboard them in your ecosystem, and again, align incentives over time. Another idea that I think has been mentioned already today in previous presentations, of course, you can we can think of ways to actually issuing hypercerts and acknowledging this public goods contributions. Right, this is something that we're actually discussing with the Protocol Labs team. And then finally, the one that I'm super excited. So yeah, like lists are cool. I think what you can do with crypto, leveraging the composability of Ethereum, you can now make this a multi-party game. What I mean by that is that, again, in the Web2 world, when we're talking to organizations there, usually there is a decision maker, right? Like there's always one decision maker that actually will eventually decide, what to fund and how to go about this and all of that. But when we're speaking to DAOs, we see something very different. Many of those teams actually, operate within non-hierarchical, with non-hierarchical ways of collaborating. And again, here I believe that there is an opportunity to actually curate those lists in many interesting ways. The Optimus Collective is using badges, for instance, and badge holders, right? We can do this, or you can use something like Moloch. You can use really like any governance model that is reflected on the Ethereum state. So yeah, fund your dependencies, people. Let's actually. I really think that we have to, as movement within Web3, go beyond just cool mechanisms. I think mechanisms are extremely important, but I also really think that we need new cultural norms. We need to showcase behavior, that we want more people actually, to follow. And we have this, beautiful permanent infrastructure for that, right? So it's so interesting that even still today, within crypto, you go to organizations that actually do good, and you ask them like, hey, can I actually see where you have been doing all of this activity? And there's no way to consume that. This is all on chain. It just happens that we don't have the right tools yet. So we hope that we will be able to contribute to that. So yeah, that's it from me. Thank you so much for listening. Check out our work on drips.network.